Hello and welcome to the Beginning by Thinking show. While you're watching or listening, think about how many times you've sat down today. Now think about what your life would be like if you didn't have the luxury of being able to sit down. I cannot comprehend how much of a challenge this must be. I'm grateful to have Krista Thom joining me today, who has a sitting disability and has been standing since April 2017. This is going to be a three-part series. Part 1 will be looking into the details of sitting disabilities and the course of events that led to the injury. Part 2 will look at the injury, how the injury changed Krista's perspective on life, as well as the personal struggles and impact of mental health. Part 3 will be how sitting disabilities lead to further health problems, and details on a recovery process or how to nullify physical pain. Krista, thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
Yes, thank you very much, James, for inviting me on.
And might I add, very, very stoic of you to be able to talk about such a topic.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about it, so I might as well talk about it too.
So, I'd like to start by talking about your story, how all of this happened, what led you to having this injury.
Yeah, so that's actually, I'll give you the best reconstruction I can. Although keep in mind, as I was first experiencing this and going through it, I had really no idea what was going on. And it's really only been the past few months where I was able to sort of go back, and you can't historically say for sure this is what happened, but it matches certain patterns and it makes a lot of sense. So it's a profile that sort of explains how I could get to where I am now. And so, like I said, in April 2017, that's sort of when my problems first started. And I started noticing, all these cramps and twitches and strange sensations along my sciatic nerve. And then over the course of a few months, that started just getting worse and worse, where it used to be just like a minor irritant when I lay down. But after a few months, it was so bad where I really couldn't lay down at all. I realized after, a few months that sitting was making it worse. So it really just seemed to spiral out of control very quickly, and doctors couldn't tell me why. Now, I had a lot of imaging tests done and a lot of, nerve conduction tests, blood tests, that sort of thing. And none of them really seemed very conclusive. And it was only once I learned about provocation testing and, getting in certain positions, see what hurts and what doesn't, and how that can be used in combination with those imaging tests to sort of put together the full picture of, you have these abnormalities and that's causing these symptoms. So now it seems pretty clear that I have a disc extrusion at the L5-S1 level in my lower spine, and it seems that that's what's actually behind the sciatica. And what likely happened there, so just my general life, before this was happening. So I worked at a desk job. I was in publishing, so I was sitting for most of the day. And, I would also write as a hobby. So a lot of evenings I was just sitting there writing at my computer or something. But when I wasn't doing that, I also very much like to be active and exercise. So I would go to the gym, do weightlifting. I was big into pole dancing, which is very, weightlifting and also flexibility heavy. So I was doing these things and I didn't realize that the combination of stresses from the compressive forces that were placed on my spine when I was doing some of this weightlifting with, I'm sure, not very good form, and combined with the flexed position, the sort of slight bending forward position that my spine was in when I was sitting down, that just created the perfect conditions for a disc herniation. And then, of course, when I would repeat those patterns, do more of this lifting and then continue to sit down all day, that was likely just exacerbating the problem and making it worse. But of course, I wasn't really aware of what was going on. I just realized that, when I'm sitting all day, that really seems to be a problem. So now looking back, it's like, oh, well, all these little pieces of things that I'm noticing, that makes sense. But at the time I was going through it, it was just like, what is going on? What could possibly be happening to me? Why does my nerve just suddenly hate me?
Apologies for this rather terse question, but how do you actually sleep without serious discomfort?
So for a long time, I did not sleep. And that's not really an exaggeration. I mean, I was on my feet 20 or more hours a day during my worst phases. I mean, I could not lay down for more than a few minutes at a time. A really good night's sleep for me would be 4 to 6 hours, but that was not a typical thing. Many nights I just wouldn't sleep at all. And then, of course, laying down, I kept getting these horrendous, like full leg Charlie horses, worse than I've ever had in my life. So sitting down was out of the question. Lying down was out of the question. So it was basically I could stand and that was it.
And how could you best articulate this pain? Is it like a searing pain, serious aching pain? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question, and I'm glad you've asked it just because this is something that I've struggled with and I know other people with sitting disabilities have struggled with, and it's that being able to actually describe your pain, because I think it's weird and people have this disconnect of everybody has pain. Everybody has had a cramp. Everybody has had a sleepless night. And there's sort of this feeling of like, yeah, like I get it, that's unpleasant, but it's not crippling, it's not disabling. What's the big deal? And so for me, what was actually happening, like I said, it wasn't just sheer nerve pain like you would expect with sciatica, although sometimes I did have that. But for me, the main problem was muscle twitches. And then, like I said, it seems like they would build up from little twitches and they would just get bigger and bigger until my entire leg would just lock up into a solid mass. And that was incredibly painful. And it's sort of, I noticed like if I kept my muscles tense, it was less of a problem, which is kind of why I stood all the time, because then I could keep the tension on those muscles. And it's like the pain it was there, but it could never really catch up with me. Like the twitches could never cause that full force pain. And the best way I can really describe it for another person is just imagine anytime you tried to relax, anytime that you sat down or you lay down or just, tried to calm down and relax your muscles for a minute, somebody was behind you with a taser and they would just tase you as soon as you stopped expecting it.
It's very sharp. Very sharp
yeah.
pain.
So it would be very sharp and sudden, and it was always sort of like an unexpected nature to it, where it seemed to just, and like I said, it would come whenever I would let my guard down. So it was actually probably 2 years that I was suffering through the worst of that. And just the way I thought about it in my mind is I thought I have this demon nipping at my heels. I mean, I can't stop moving for a minute. I've got to keep the tension on those muscles. I've got to keep standing. I've got to keep walking. Walking seemed to help. And also, like I said, it just kept the tension in those muscles really well. And it was slightly more comfortable than standing. So I felt like if I slowed down, if I stopped moving for a minute, this thing, which I didn't know what it was going to get me. So that's how I viewed it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty horrible. It must be
I didn't
really
enjoy
shocking, and it's almost like it's creeping up on you.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it was, and I could see like little whispers of it coming. Like I'd start to relax and I'd get little twitches, which is just more annoying, but they would get stronger and stronger and recruit more muscle fibers until, like I said, it would be my whole leg that would just lock up.
And was this at a point of time where you didn't really know what was going on? How did that feel when it was sort of just so surprising and you didn't know what went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it was terrifying, and it's kind of really hard even to communicate that, because normally, I think of myself as a rational person. I can think things through. I can look to the future and make decisions. But when you're in that moment, when the pain is intense, it's coming to get you. I was so sleep deprived. And then, of course, I had no idea what was causing it. And I didn't know, is this going to kill me? Is this just pain? Like what? I have no idea. And just the sheer terror of that, of like, I don't know how much worse this is going to get. I don't know how much more of this I can stand. And in that moment, it's like, I would have done anything. I would have sacrificed a limb. I would have experienced any pain that I had. And I could easily see, I think sciatica is one of those things where I see a lot of questionable marketing for products and whatever.
Yeah.
But that seems very obvious to me now, because when you're in that moment of intense pain, I don't care how smart you are, how thoughtful you are, sometimes it's really hard to see past the present moment and to make a long-term rational decision. It's like, you want this to be done right now. Whatever you have to give to have that happen is fine.
My final question for this part is, are there variations of sitting disabilities on a varied scale of almost like a 1 to 10 of severity?
Yeah, so there definitely are different causes of sitting disabilities, and I'm talking about sciatica. I'm talking about a disc herniation because that's what I have. And that's a common reason for a sitting disability, but it's by no means the only one. There's things like a pudendal neuralgia, which is also a nerve condition, and it's nerves in your pelvis. There's other forms of back conditions. There's Tarlov's cysts, basically a cyst on the nerve. There's other nerve entrapment problems. So there's many of these conditions. There isn't, as far as I know, anybody has put together like a full rating of like, oh, this is the easy sitting disability, this is the hard one. And each of those conditions come with their own set of abilities and disabilities. And of course, within each condition, people will have varying degrees of severity for that. So it's really, there are a lot of ways to have a sitting disability. They are each uniquely terrible in their own right, but it's hard to really compare them or arrange them along a particular spectrum, just because there is such a broad range, and people's individual experiences, even within that, definitely vary.
I think that's a lovely place to cap off part 1 of this discussion. Part 2, we'll look into how the injury has changed Krista's perspective on life, as well as the personal struggles and impact on mental health.